Infinite Warfare Zombies. It is the most overlooked and underrated game since Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. If this exact game mode was made by Treyarch, I fully believe it would be widely considered a top 3 game in the Zombies franchise. And that's because, for the most part, any side mode that's not made by Treyarch is often looked at as an off-brand product by the COD community. Now, I am well aware that is a bold claim, because I'm saying this game beats one of Black Ops 1, 2, or 3, so let me try and explain myself here. Infinite Warfare is very unique in how it frames its story and gameplay. Our crew was tricked by the director, Willard Wyler, and now has to fight their way through a zombie-infested films to survive. This creates a lot of room for some incredibly fun and creative map settings, and as you see, we'll go on from fighting aliens in a simple amusement park to fighting different aliens in space. Okay, all jokes aside, each map feels incredibly distinct and it gives this game a lot of charm. But since it is a follow-up to Black Ops 3, of course it is going to have its own gobblegum type system. And while it isn't quite Black Ops 4 level of bad, it can definitely feel pretty greedy at times. Granted, a lot of the fortune cards you can get are more fun than the gobblegums, with things like Evade giving you the ability to have a dash, or a card that gives your entire team more points for better accuracy. There really is a nice mix of fun and powerful cards to choose from here, but sadly the free fake cards are all incredibly lackluster, plus the unpacking system often feels very stacked against you, with pulling a top tier card being pretty rare. Alongside the cards though, we also have the gun locker, giving players powerful variants of their weapons throughout the map, and while the salvage grind for these can feel like a lot at times, this kind of thing inside of a PvE mode works really well, and I would argue it's the best way to do loadouts in zombies compared to things like Cold War. So with the out of game systems explained, let's hop into the first map. Many people consider this to be the peak of the game, and while I don't share that belief, it is probably one of the most successful launch maps in any of the Zombies games. Zombies in Spaceland is a wonderfully vibrant amusement park that is only slightly more dangerous than your local fair. As we're launching into it, we're treated with a pretty long intro cutscene that explains the setup for the game and how our crew got here. One of the best parts about this is that Infinity Ward had enough confidence in their writing and story to just kinda let this play out without rushing it to get players into the action. There are long sections of it where it's just Willard talking to our crew to set him up as the big bad. And on top of that, the story doesn't take itself too seriously in general. It's a fun, wacky adventure to go along with a game that really just tries to bring you in on vibes alone, and it does that really well. Spaceland is split into 4 distinct zones. We have Spawn, Journey, Triton, and Kepler. One of the reasons the map feels so great is the seamless flow between these areas. In my last retrospective on Black Ops 3, I mentioned that one of the reasons Gorod Krovi felt kind of bad to play at times is that while all the sections had a consistent style and mixed well, the design of them made it feel easy to get dizzy when trying to navigate quickly and get lost. What's different here is that while each area fits the theme of an amusement park, they all still have their own mini theme. You're not likely to get the giant roller coaster section mixed up with the bumper cars and rocket ride in the same way you would get Tank Factory and Supply Depot mixed up. Yup, we got undead clowns. Don't be too scared though, since if you thought the dogs were paper thin in BO3, oh boy do I have some news for you. Any gun you find will one-shot these things on pretty much any round. So much like its predecessor, the bonus rounds on this game are just slightly unnerving breaks for the player. Infinite Warfare maps also tend to have a bonus enemy outside of just the bonus round, and here it's the Brute. And he honestly isn't much of a threat either, only becoming relevant when doing the many side quests on the map, like getting the alligator some iced out teeth. While at first it seems like this map has a very obvious 3-lane setup to navigate between areas, as you start to explore, you'll find a vast amount of small shortcuts to get between the major locations. This raises the skill cap for players looking to quickly get things done and makes casual navigation feel rewarding as you get better at the game. And with that, you often don't even notice when you move into a different section until you see one of the major landmarks. That's because the in-between areas are blended so seamlessly that it never seems jarring when you travel from one main location to another. Yet somehow, like I mentioned before, it never feels confusing or hard to navigate. On the note of navigation, it's time for me to make some enemies, because the movement system inside of Infinite Warfare is on par with Black Ops 3. Whereas the fun in that game came from the infinite slide combined with crisp feeling inputs, IW has the same fantastic feeling controls but with a different type of skill. As you're getting better at the game, you'll learn that you can abuse the bunny hopping mechanic on any small incline for a big speed boost, then slide on any decline to carry that momentum. When you combine those techs, it provides some of the best feeling controls in all of the Zombies games. As you're running around practicing those mechanics, you'll notice that this map has some incredibly fun traps to use, my personal favorite being the Journey ride. Unlike the electric trap or fire traps from Treyarch games, these feel really intertwined with the map's vibe and setting. You have so many ones that fit perfectly into their areas, and then the one that's most responsible for visits to the afterlife. This is the Afterlife arcade, and it is one of the coolest additions to Infinite Warfare Zombies. After bleeding out, instead of being forced to wait around and spectate your teammates, just hoping they don't die, you spawn inside of an arcade and have to earn enough tickets to escape. If you've played enough of the game and know what to do, you can get back into the action fairly easily by playing the right machines, though it can take new players a little while to figure it out. If you do manage to get the tickets in time and get back into the world, instead of being stuck on your starting weapon like in the Treyarch games, you can make your way to spawn and pay a fee to get all your guns back. This feels amazing and allows you to actually stay in the game, since in the older titles, dying on round 15 plus can basically feel like a game over for you in co-op as you run around with your 1911. Before, I mentioned that this might be one of the best launch maps of any of the zombie games, so why is that? When you look back into games like Black Ops 2, Transit was paired with survival maps like Town and Nuketown. This is because the complex nature of Transit can be harmful to someone first learning the game, so you needed somewhere simple to learn the basics. And unfortunately, since this mode probably didn't have the budget for 2 launch maps, Spaceland had the unenviable task of both being accessible to new players and intricate enough to hold the attention of veterans. So how did they do in that regard? This map's complexity mostly comes from the skill expression. Pretty much everything to do is simple on the surface but has a high skill ceiling or hidden depth to it. For example, the prize mechanic from the coins the zombies drop. Most people just throw whatever random one they get into the machine and place slots on whatever might come out. And while this will work in getting you some fun, powerful weapons, if you take the time to learn what specific combos you need, it can become one of the best mechanics on the map. Similarly, most of the kneel challenges are simple enough to be done by any player, rewarding them with a fair amount of tickets. And that ticket system is this map's gimmick. Every map in Infinite Warfare has one. You can play different arcade games or complete challenges to easily get them, then spend high amounts to gain access to free max ammos, grenade refills, or new equipment. This is a fun way to reward players with side content, and things like the roller coaster shootout are really fun to mess around with your friends. Walking around the arcade, you'll find the Ghost and Skulls machine. This specific side quest allows you to go into the arcade machine and play a minigame to get a free perkaholic. Alongside the Afterlife arcade, this is a staple of Infinite Warfare and incredibly iconic. Each map changes the quest and game you play. Here it's probably the simplest, because all you need to do is grab things and get rid of the skulls until they're all clear. However, I do think this is where Infinite Warfare started to fall into some of the traps that Treyarch has over the years, and we'll see this more in their later eggs, but the Ghost and Skulls eggs in a lot of the maps can start to be incredibly tiresome and overly complex. Sometimes it's fun, like on Beast where you do a stationary lockdown, but other times it just feels like the worst part of Treyarch eggs where you're looking up guide after guide on where to find certain parts and do incredibly obscure steps. Though, outside of some odd steps and a little bit of poor execution, I cannot stress enough how brilliant this is as a concept. It makes Perkaholics accessible to everyone without needing to grind gobblegums, and has a high level of skill expression since you need to complete a quest to unlock it. And the minigame itself is normally just pretty fun. With the perk system, we also get a lot of the old mixed with the new. A good portion of Treyarch perks return, alongside new ones like Slappy Taffy, which gives AoE melee with increased damage, and Trailblazers, which adds damage to your slide. While these aren't top tier perks, Slappy Taffy is extremely powerful for getting points in the early rounds, plus you won't have to worry about losing a perk slot since Infinity Ward had the ingenious idea of allowing you to remove a perk you already bought. Really, this is just one of the easiest maps to pick up and play. Most of the side content is super simple to figure out, you have an easy challenge system that most players will find on their own, and a wonder weapon that can be bought with tickets even if it's not the best one. Outside of the bargain bin snow cone machine, there are 4 other buildable wonder weapons. Where have I seen that before? These things are awesome, both thematically and functionally. Keeping with the fact that everything on this map is based around aliens or theme parks, these ray gun designs feel like a sci-fi toy you could win from an arcade, and using them can give you the same feeling as an acid trip. Disclaimer, I have never done nor will I ever do acid. Don't do drugs, kids. Terms and conditions may apply. I feel like I say this about one of the wonder weapons in each game as we go through it, but these might be some of the most fun wonder weapons in the series. Some of them are simple, like the Shredder, which just disintegrates zombies. Then you have the wacky one that turns zombies into a rocket flying into the air and exploding like a firework on the 4th of July. Unlike some of the more recent maps, Pack-a-Punch is also a quest that pretty much anyone can figure out on their own, with the player just needing to activate and use each of the map's teleporters. A double Pack-a-Punch system also does return inside of Infinite Warfare, but in a very different way than Black Ops 3. Instead of the alternate ammo types that provide infinite damage, essentially making every gun a wonder weapon, the second upgrade inside of IW will increase your gun's damage massively and cost the player a hefty 10,000 points. Either this or Cold War is the best upgrade system in the franchise. It isn't so overpowered that every single gun is broken, but it is powerful enough to last you deep into the rounds, increasing gun variety without sacrificing how unique they feel. Plus, unlike Black Ops 3, it isn't just limited to bullet guns, so explosives are still on the table. Eat your heart out, Mustang and Sally. You definitely have to go on quite the mission to unlock that double pack-a-punch, so let's get into this map's main quest, which gives you permanent access to it on Spaceland. Much like the rest of the map, the main quest is extremely straightforward yet challenging. After getting the pack-a-punch open, you just need to collect 3 parts for the SETICOM, then speak to the hero of the SpongeBob movie, David Hasselhoff.
I'm David Hasselhoff.
His appearance is the start of a trend inside of Infinite Warfare, where each map will have a special celebrity guest that you can play as after completing the map's main Easter egg, which is just really cool and a fun reward. So after we get this device, we just need to find 3 locations around the map to defend it from waves of buffed up zombies. Again, this is incredibly simple, but ends up being fun and engaging since some of the locations are very tough to work in and you will fail it several times more than likely. Once you complete it, well, that's the entire main quest before the boss fight. Making a simple but challenging quest is exactly what IW needed for its launch map. Outside of memorizing the part spawns, there's nothing you need to learn for this egg, making it incredibly accessible. You'll see later on in maps like Shaolin Shuffle, the quests start to get a lot more complex, which can work since the players had a lot of time to learn the game and build up to that point. Though I do have a lot to say about that map's main quest, but we will get to that. If we launched with a map like Shaolin, it likely would have been another Shadows of Evil situation, where it was pretty much not liked at first but grew on players over the years, which for a spin-off title would just kill the game, since it doesn't have that same level of trust that Black Ops has. About the boss fights. This is what Infinite Warfare Zombies does better than any other game in the franchise, and it's not even close. They kept it fairly simple in the first 2 maps, but that doesn't mean bad. In fact, I would say that Spaceland is still far better than almost every single other Treyarch fight. At the start, you'll need to play Simon Says with some lights and sounds, which is pretty simple but can be challenging with less players as zombies swarm you. Doing this 3 times will spawn a wave of clowns that will lead up to a real battle. For each player in the game, an alien will spawn in. These Mr. Meesinks lookalikes are tough, with their ray guns being able to almost one-shot you with a direct hit, even with Jug. The goal of the fight is to whittle down the alien's health until the color turns red. Then, as they fall to their knees, you need to walk up and melee them in the back without dying. Doing this twice will take out 1 alien. Now that sounds super simple, but in practice you need to have a solid loadout or the swarm of zombies and explosive ray gun shots will down you. This mix of easy to follow instructions and challenging gameplay are present in every single one of Infinite Warfare's boss fights, which is what makes them so good. You're never lost on what to do, just how to do it without dying. After beating the boss fight, here's what you see. Yeah, despite having a fantastic boss fight and egg, the ending is very underwhelming. That does seem to be a trend inside of the non-Treyarch zombie games. Regardless, you now have access to playing as ocean swimming champion David Hasselhoff, and can always double pack-a-punch weapons on Spaceland. Altogether, it's really easy to see why so many people loved this map. It brings you in with its goofy charm, a stark contrast from the more serious story that Treyarch was telling in Black Ops 3, and keeps you engaged with its unique but familiar gameplay. Sadly, many people didn't bother getting the DLCs for Infinite Warfare, since as a whole the game was not received well in the greater COD fanbase, and by this point I think Zombies fatigue was starting to kick in, since by then we had been getting a version of the mode in every single game since 2012. That does mean from this point onward, the maps don't receive nearly as much praise as Spaceland from the wider community. That's not to say that the goodwill toward IW's launch map isn't warranted. I just talked about how fantastic of an experience it was. But moving into Rave, the game just only gets better. During a video where he got to round 100 on every single Infinite Warfare map, a great YouTuber named Samuel the 17th described Rave In The Redwoods as the most cozy zombies map, and despite its setting as a horror slasher, I 100% agree. Playing through Rave In The Redwoods never makes you feel lost. The map is designed in such a way that it's always clear what area or path leads to the next, and the map's progression never feels tedious because of it. The map's spawn room changes the zombies' formula right away by removing your starting weapon and forcing you to find household items to melee the horde away. This is a reference to these types of slasher movies, but it's also a great way to give the map more personality right off the bat. Being set in a campsite, this map has all of the areas you would expect. Outside of spawn, there's a bonfire area or a mess hall depending on which way you go, and areas like the rave stage are fantastic for high rounding with incredibly quick spawns, and the cabin grounds plus the jungle cores provide tight, challenging areas to navigate. Then the beach is a slower but easier open place to train in. Even more so than Spaceland was, this is a very circular map, similar to maps like 9 or Kino. If you follow a path, you're eventually going to end up back where you started instead of a dead end. This circular design allows for balanced progression and simple setup, with each route having one boat part, and the final part sitting next to Tough Enough above spawn once you get the power on. Placing the power and Tough Enough alright, I'm just gonna call it Jug from here on out, you all know what I mean, until you manage to get to where all of the routes collide is a great way to keep challenge up in the earlier rounds, even with the 3-hit down system. Small things like that with the intelligent design really push these maps into the higher tiers and keep each early game interesting. And then with a different type of interesting, this map's famous cameo is Kevin Smith, and unlike the savior of the Bikini Bottom, David Hasselhoff, I had no idea who this guy was and still don't, so we're kind of just gonna move on. Honestly, until writing this retrospective, I thought he and Kevin James, the star of the hit sitcom The King of Queens, were the same person. Anyway, all it takes to get to good old Kevin Smith is to hop on the boat after getting the parts. And my god, is this unnecessarily long! For a while, me and my buddies were learning to speedrun this map, and this boat ride was the absolute death of us. Landing on the island is where you'll find Pack-a-Punch, and Rave has the same double pack requirement as Spaceland did, beat the Spaceland Easter egg, which is a bit odd, but hey, it's only their second map, so I will give some grace here. If you haven't done that egg, you can unlock the fuses by just interacting with a computer after turning the power on, which is significantly easier than both of the next two maps, and while I don't think double Pack-a-Punch access should be ridiculously hard, doing an entire main quest is honestly a bit too much. This does feel like a last minute addition, and I do like how it's done later on a bit more. But since we're now at Kevin's cabin, it's probably a good time to transition into the wonder weapons of this map. Unlike Spaceland, you don't have to hunt down several parts for each one, instead you just need to go on a little fun side mission. First, pick up these juicy wieners from the bucket Kevin just happens to have laying around. A bit weird, but hey, you do you, man. And make your way to any bonfire around the map. These bonfires are actually this map's gimmick. I mean, hey, you can't have a rave without copious amounts of whatever psychedelic is found in these bags, right? Going into this mode will give you double points for its duration, which can be extended by talking to the magic floating fairies. I think the devs may have thought this one up after a weekend company party, if you get what I'm saying. Once you get into the later rounds, this will become a bit of a bad trip, and the mini-boss of this map will spawn in. The copyright-avoiding, nondescript man with a mask and chainsaw. We'll just call him Slasher. He can almost one-shot you with Jug on a single charge, so you always need to keep an eye on him while farming points during your high. The Slasher is probably the least annoying bonus zombie in any of these maps. You'll see later on some of them get quite frustrating, and he can be difficult at times, but he's mostly very manageable and with a very fair feeling balance. Altogether, this gimmick is pretty amazing. It rewards skilled and experienced players who are looking to optimize the map with an almost infinite double points if done correctly, but in a way that doesn't make the game too easy, which would have been an easy trap to fall into. Circling back to the wonder weapons, well, in this form, you'll need to find 3 deer heads around the map and throw those soaked up wieners at them. Alright, that's the last joke I'll make about that. It's really not my best work, I admit. Shooting them and grabbing the symbols will unlock the cabinet of crossbows, which on their own are actually pretty bad. They function the same as the Black Ops 1 crossbow, just with some actual damage. The real power comes in when you find the 4 animal figures around the map and do a couple kill steps. It's simple and fun for an upgrade, and Infinity Ward really nailed this one. Among the 4 variants of Acid Rain, Lightning, Trap-O-Matic, and the Thunder crossbows, Acid Rain and Thunderbow definitely stand out the most in terms of power, with the latter literally just being a thunder gun, but Acid Rain and the Trap-O-Matic are definitely the coolest in design. Then, much like its Origins counterpart, the Lightning upgrade is just kind of there. In terms of fun and power, these are definitely on par with the Spaceland ray guns, and they make high round runs a great time and relatively easy on this map, unless of course you have 0 talent. Alright, play the clip. Oh, it's the game over.
Yep, I don't know why I greeted for that shot.
To show even more how much of a skill issue I had there, there's more things to make the game even easier with the alternate grenade quests and the ability upgrades. The abilities are basically simple buildables that act like the hats on Revelations. These can be kind of useless like the 8-ball giving you a bit of sliding damage, or kind of OP like killing all the zombies around you when you revive a teammate, or the frog letting you sprint in the water. As for the grenades, the quests are also all very simple. Things like melee zombies or get distance kills. The real gems of these challenges are the rewind grenade and the transponder grenades, with the transponder allowing you to skip the boat ride in speedruns and get you out of tight spots in normal gameplay. Then the rewind is a free max ammo that also moves you out of whatever corner you're stuck in, which can be a godsend inside of the late rounds, since max ammo seem to be a very rare occurrence in this game. Actually, you know what? I do want to touch or rant about that for a minute. This game really doesn't seem like it has a drop cycle like the older ones do, so you can get several max ammos in a short amount of time, or you can get 0 non-boss max ammos for 30 plus rounds while doing a round 100 run. You can fact check me on that one. I have the stream on my channel. And that sounds like I'm just complaining about bad luck, which I kind of am, but there's a reason that the other games have a cycle. It balances the gameplay out and removes an easy avenue for player frustration. That's one of the few issues I do have with this game consistently. Looking at this map's main quest, it's arguably even simpler than Spaceland's, and a bit easier too. It really only has one step repeated 3 times. Hop on the boat, talk to Mr. Smith, and then go find a picture piece somewhere on the map. You use this piece to start a trial, which is either shooting off arms, legs, or heads of the zombies, then return to the cabin and repeat. It sounds kinda boring when you just listen to it, but in practice it makes the egg incredibly fast paced and easy to remember since you only need to know 3 spawn locations, and it's incredibly replayable. That is the main strength of the first 2 quests in Infinite Warfare. Unlike a lot of the Treyarch maps, you don't need a Google Doc to navigate them or to code a bunch of random ciphers. You can really tell, at least in the first 2 maps, that Infinity Ward wanted to play it simple with the eggs, with a focus on short but engaging quests. The entire quest really reminds me of some of the most fun steps inside of even the best Treyarch eggs. As far as the story of the map goes, Kevin turned into a giant slasher and killed his buddy. That's pretty much it. And while it tries to play this straight and a bit sad, the monologue he gives as you boat your way to the main boss never ceases to make me and my friends laugh. For some reason, there is pretty much 0 animation on his face as he's panicking about losing his friend, which pulls all of the tension and impact out of what he says and just creates a funny scene. Here, give this a watch.
No, this has got to be a fucking mistake. I didn't kill him. I couldn't have killed him. Oh man, Jay, man. Jay, I gotta get out of here. I gotta find Jay. Jay!
The boss fight itself is actually better than Spaceland though. Basically, you have to kill zombies around the skulls with the number increased based on your player count, then hit a glowing spot on Monster Kevin when he enters a circle. Now these spots will show up periodically and you have to hit them until you do enough damage. Repeat this a couple times. In between that, you have to survive against a wave of skeletons in a restricted area. Again, it's not complex at all, you always know what's next, but the simple gameplay is refined to hell and it's always a good time to play. Rest in peace, Kevin. You truly were the king of queens. Another thing that Rave surpasses Spaceland in is just how easy it is to pick up and play. It is probably the easiest map to play of any in the entire franchise. The focus of IW Zombies in its early days was clearly to avoid complex maps we saw near the end of Black Ops 3 in favor of small but fun experiences. At this point, the game is basically a more refined version of the Black Ops 1 philosophy. Unfortunately for this game's life, the community hype for Infinite Warfare kind of died here, and it wasn't really the game's fault. During the cycle of DLC 3, Zombies Chronicles was announced and released, which brought all of the avid Treyarch fans back to Black Ops 3 and pretty much killed this game's life early. But did the community really miss out on that much, or did the game really just peak in its early days? Well, there's only one way to find out, right? If we were to just go off vibes and environment, this is probably the best map in Infinite Warfare. Shaolin takes place inside of disco-era New York City, which has been taken over by zombies and the Rat King. This is the game's first attempt at a massively complex map, and unfortunately, I do think it's the first mostly miss of the game, which isn't to say it's entirely bad. Overall, it finishes as an average map and still manages to be a fun experience with just a handful of flaws. It just doesn't live up to the same level of fun that Rave and Spaceland did. Unlike the simple, mostly linear layout of those 2 maps, Shaolin deviates from the circular design in favor of single-lane pathways and tight entryways. It has a heavy focus on extremely narrow pathways where only you and a couple of zombies can fit through at a time, which is a stark contrast from the mostly open and easy layout of the first 2 maps. Because of that, there's very few training places that exist on this map, making the only real option for high rounding to camp. And while I'm not against the idea of a camping-based map, DLCs like Buried did this concept much better by still having open training areas if you want to play that way. And honestly, camping is just the more boring type of play in my opinion. Which leads to the new perk, a variation of the worst perk in Zombies, Deadshot, encourages the camp-only mindset as well by removing recoil and increasing damage for aiming down sights for longer periods of time. And honestly, it's a fantastic perk and it's almost close to a must-have if you aren't running the melee weapons. The only real place you can train, the bottom of the sewers, would seem like a top-tier training spot at a glance, because it's just mostly an open similar room akin to 9 starting room. And while you would be right on pretty much any other map, Shaolin decided to introduce the single worst special zombie we have seen thus far. Enter the Ninja Zombies. These absolute abominations were probably the result of devs huffing paint thinner and ingesting copious amounts of marijuana, because that is the only explanation I can find for them. If you don't know, their sole purpose is to stop you from sprinting, because if you do that, they'll appear in front of you and give you the pimp hand. Or foot, they actually mostly kick you, I think. What's even more frustrating is the ninja zombies gain health faster than the normal zombies, since they're a special enemy, meaning your main weapons won't be able to one-shot them for nearly as long. Compared to other new enemies on this map, like the roller skating zombies, these guys just feel very out of place mechanically. To its credit though, Shaolin fully commits to its design and gives you tools to circumnavigate the more frustrating aspects. For instance, we see the first true melee wonder weapons in both the katana and the nunchucks. These both will one-shot normal and ninja zombies pretty deep into the rounds, and quickly remove zombies that could block your path. And those body blocks do happen quite often, since almost every zombie spawn on this map is from the ground instead of windows. That sort of design, while it makes sense when you think about what they wanted the map to flow like, can be even more frustrating when you don't have the option you need to instantly kill 1 or 2 zombies. When you're traversing through the lanes, cutting back is rarely an option, so you need to always somehow get around whatever blocks your path, and that's normally through killing them. Because of this, many of the somewhat open areas, like the disco floor, are still almost unplayable without both wonder weapons due to the odd spawn choices and zombie pathing. And even sometimes when you have them, since the melee detection is pretty bad in Infinite Warfare, you'll still get inconsistent results. This is a generally positive video about the game, and that was the most complaining I've done in a row about any of these maps, so let's talk about what's good about this version of New York City for a little bit. Alongside the disco theming, this map also has a lot of martial art elements, with Pam Grier, the map's celebrity appearance, teaching you the way of the tiger, crane, dragon, or snake. These were implemented for the same reason that the wonder weapons were, give you as many tools as possible to make up for the zombie spawns and tight training areas. It took me a long time to get around to trying all of the different styles as I played the game more and more, but as I got more use out of them and tried the max upgrades, this is definitely my favorite gimmick of the game. Having a fun side ability upgraded through simply using it instead of a weird complex side egg is an interesting and fantastic addition, and I wish they would do this more in the recent games. Plus, I just adore the abilities they give you. They're incredibly unique, doing things like summoning a skeleton to slay the undead, or going immune to damage and Hulk slamming the ground. And once again, touching on the aesthetic of this map, it's another fantastic thing about it. More so than even Spaceland, the map fully realizes its theme and characters. There isn't a single thing on here that I could look at and say, this doesn't really belong here, which isn't always the case in these games. Even Pam Grier as a martial arts master feels like it makes perfect sense because of the way it's implemented into the map. Honestly, a lot of maps in IW feel like they were modeled and staged to be a design without gameplay in mind first, then transformed to fit the zombies mode, which in turn makes every single one of these areas you encounter feel like it fits in with the rest of the map and each pathway naturally flows between themselves. And all of that is to say nothing on how fun the wonder weapons are to actually use in the early to mid rounds. My first time finding the nunchucks, I lost my mind with how much fun I had just walking around the map, slapping silly every zombie I saw, even if it did cause me to go down a couple times.
Alright, just don't fall into the... Oh my god, bro! Dude, what the...
My main point is that even a map with clear and obvious flaws like Shaolin is incredibly fun and replayable in Infinite Warfare because of how well the small things are implemented and the clear focus on fun the devs had when it came to designing weapons and abilities. On the note of flaws, I'm really not a huge fan of this map's pack-a-punch unlock system. Really, it's a simple search for and find 3 parts on the map and the door will open. But due to its theme, everything is covered in trash and debris, so you need to find a small pink flyer somewhere on the street. It can get pretty frustrating. It's definitely not the worst way to unlock upgrades in the series, but it's not nearly as well executed as things like Spaceland or Rave. What I do like about it though, compared to those 2 maps, is how you unlock the double pack-a-punch. Scattered around the city are various barriers and doors that you can unlock from your martial arts ability, which then acts as a teleporter for quick navigation. By using one of these and hitting a button, you can grab the fuses and charge them and insert them into the projector. I think I like this simply because of how great the mechanic is on its own outside of the upgrade quest. It keeps the flow of the game normal until most of the doors are open, then allows you to have quicker navigation as a reward for reaching the end of the map. Transit tried to do something similar with its Denizen teleportation, but since this is actually a good map, it's done much better. Since on that map, the teleportation can be just as frustrating as the bus itself. Here's hoping Treyarch learned their lesson for Terminus. Shaolin also forgoes the coin and gem system from its predecessors in favor of Mahjong-style buildables, and coming from someone who really loves die rise, they took the worst step from that Easter egg and made it into a major map mechanic. Buildables aren't inherently bad, and it works well in maps like Buried and Origins, but small Mahjong pieces are never going to be the way, in the same way that placing dominoes all over a map and telling you to find them would never be a good mechanic. Even with a guide, these can be super frustrating to find since they're just so small and blend in, and if you wanted to change up the gem system, buildables probably weren't the best avenue to take, at least not like this. Positively though, the buildables are still super fun. Once again, sticking to the idea that the execution of the abilities and upgrades are making up for poor design to unlock them. I'm a simple man. I see zombies dancing on a disco floor, I get a little happy. So with all of that out of the way, it's time to talk about Shaolin's main quest. And this main quest makes me a little bit upset because it has some of the most fun and some of the most frustrating mechanics in the game thus far. It starts off super simple. Just get to round 5, unlock the map, and upgrade your martial art to the first level. So far so good. Then we need to take the shurikens we get and open up the various cages and follow a rat around. This is kind of cool, if not a little bit tedious, but the main reason why me and my friends love this step so much is just how god awful the model and animation are. Like, they clearly ran low on time here and just threw a standard rat model and made it jiggle while moving around. But this little guy became iconic for that reason, and I love him. Completing that allows you to start the next step, which is spelling out a word by shooting Chinese kanji around the map, which does feel like a classic egg step that then leads to something I'm very torn about. You fight the Rat King 3 times before the main boss fight, which I can see the appeal of, getting 3 mini boss fights and having to combine them all and take on the real thing afterward. We saw something similar with the slasher spawning after each rave trial. My main issue comes to the fact that the Rat King isn't actually any different between these and the real boss fight. He has the same attacks, the same patterns, and the same zombie spawns, which feels like it really cheapens the effect of the final boss and can feel pretty redundant and boring. After the first time you take him out, you gain access to his eye, allowing you to see precisely where this Easter egg starts going downhill. To compare with Rave and Spaceland for a minute, both of those main quests were discovered very fast, with the former actually getting finished just hours after the map dropped. Because of this, and maybe the pressure to compete with Chronicles, Infinity Ward appears to have done their best to pad out the mission and keep people searching and playing longer. We first see this in the eye step, where there is a lot of locations that can be pretty hard to see and find hidden around the map. Then once you get 6 of them, you can move on. The problem is, moving on means completing a Morse code step. This is a message to the COD Zombies devs, including Treyarch. Morse code does not belong in an Easter egg. It kills the flow of the game while you stop on a dime to listen to little beeps and boops, and in solo matches it's near impossible to get the time to listen properly because there's no one that can hold the zombie. There is a reason people spent years just brute forcing the Blood of the Dead code before finding out there's a way to solve it, because people generally just don't like doing this type of thing. On top of all of that, Shaolin makes it worse by punishing you for mishearing and grabbing the wrong numbered poster by having you go back and find all of the symbols again, then redoing the Morse code step. I am pretty sure the 8th Amendment is supposed to protect me from that kind of thing, you know? This and the next step are clear examples of padding the runtime, and it's so sad to see since the first 2 quests were executed so well. Okay, I'm gonna calm down a bit. I feel like that was unnecessarily angry. Even more padding comes in with the alphabet step on the nightclub roof. After breaking a window with explosives, you'll need to guess a word, spell it out using an arbitrary symbol that corresponds to a letter, and hope you don't mess it up enough times and need to swap the round, because sometimes, even if you have the guides up, you can get this wrong since words will have 2 options with both letters appearing as possible to shoot. Why? I said before that the best parts about Spaceland and Rave's quests were the lack of a need to be searching through a Google Doc the entire time, and Shaolin just takes a big old dump on that concept, basically requiring you to have the possible words, alphabet converter, and the Morse code translator on you at all times, which is extra frustrating since the kill steps and the simpler steps of this egg are actually super fun. One example of that is what you do right after this abomination of a step. At first, it feels like nothing is happening after you talk to Pam, until a couple rounds later, the map's film reel cuts out and you skip 3 rounds forward, just surrounded by zombies. It's honestly such an amazing idea and really fits into the theme of moving through films. Even when I know it's coming, the timing nearly always gets me and it feels so random in the round. It's honestly just a great step altogether. And then finally, this egg goes back to classic kill steps by having us find rings around the map and take out zombies in it. It's fun and simple. And following that, I really do enjoy the disco step as a concept. I think it's only frustrating due to the spawns and overall glitchiness of the disco floor area. After that, just complete 1 final mini boss and it's time for the big final event. Interestingly, this is both the most creative and frustrating boss in the game. I love that each phase is unique and it feels like a lot of thought went into creating fun objectives besides just shooting at a bullet sponge. Things like trying to take down the symbols while training, or getting kills in the acid without dying are challenging but doable steps that reward skilled players. What I don't love about it is the 7 out of 10 chance that you will run out of ammo sometime during this fight, because you are only given 1 max ammo per phase, but each phase involves a lot of killing and bullet wasting, and then you have to kill the Rat King on top of that. I've attempted this fight probably 5 to 7 times solo without having a lot of fortune cards, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that 3/4 of the time I get soft locked for having no ammo. Maybe it's a skill issue, but it should not be possible. It becomes less of an issue the more players you have, but as it stands, this is not balanced for less than 4 players at all. The ending of the map is pretty much the same as the other 2. You get a soul key and then it gives you a little hint at the next map. And altogether, the egg kind of feels like the devs really didn't want it to be found early and added in purposefully tedious steps in between the fun and engaging ones to inflate playtime. It's really the same issue I have with a lot of the Ghosts and Skulls quest steps, but those are purely side content so they're not as bad. Because of that, Shaolin is a map better suited to purely round-based gameplay outside of its egg, but then the design can cause that to feel suffocating and unfair as well. Granted though, I do think a lot of its more unique and fun factor elements make up for the design issues, even if it does suffer from a little bit of moon syndrome, meaning that almost every good thing is met with something that also holds the map back. Moving on to Attack of the Radioactive Thing, geez, that is a long name, Infinite Warfare did not shy away from another large-scale map. The question is though, did they learn their lesson from the community complaints and general player drop-off of Shaolin Shuffle? Well, the answer is kind of yes and no depending on who you ask, so allow me to explain.
I bent over backwards to give this thing a rewrite, which is odd because usually bending over forward is so much more useful. I just kill myself sometimes.
This map is so close to being the best inside of IW, really giving Rave a run for its money, but at the same time, it's also so close to being the worst map inside of the game. What I mean is that the setup and early rounds are a chore to get through, but the map's actual gameplay and boss fight are some of the best things Infinity Ward had to offer. Much like Ascension before it, Attack of the Radioactive Thing starts off without color, mirroring the movies from its time and genre, though after a couple rounds, Elvira will get it back on for you, then making you wish she didn't do that. I don't know if it's because of the color palette, the lighting, or if it was an intentional design choice, but something just looks off about the areas. And while that does give the map a distinct look and identity, that look is, I could run on an N64, which is not exactly what you want. It's my belief that, at least in part, the less detailed lighting and weird models are a byproduct of the map's size. Much like Shaolin was a depiction of New York, this map really does feel like a large beach town. It contrasts the tight and dirty pathways from Shaolin with an open, vibrant town and beach setting. This naturally creates more training room and an overall easy map to play and navigate, but also makes more areas of the map visible at all times, which causes the map to then be more resource intensive. Because of that though, you could train at least in some part of any major location, whether that be on the beach itself or the town hub. This training variety is something that was severely lacking inside of Shaolin, and it was a nice change of pace after running that map for so long. And speaking of a nice change of pace, this map's wonder weapon, the Mad, is easier to get than all of the others. You just gotta pull it from the box. All three previous maps require a mini quest or buildable to gain access to their wonder weapon, and while that can be fun, having the option to just gamble away for it feels really nice. Once you finally get your grubby little hands on it, you'll see a decent but not great weapon. It has enough damage to one-shot zombies, but only one at a time, meaning the max kill count you're going to get is just 30. If that was all, then this would be a pretty lackluster wonder weapon and definitely the worst in the game. Ignoring its power for a minute, and this might be a hot take, I'm actually not sure, I really enjoy the simple design and look of the weapon. It's very minimalistic, matching the toned down sci-fi vibe this map gives off. And honestly, despite looking like it was made for the Atari, Attack still manages to keep everything on theme and cohesive. Back onto its power, it's not without its own upgrade process. You'll need to run around the map and collect parts to upgrade it, and then doing so, it can be charged up to act as a pseudo thunder gun. It's still not the craziest weapon in the world. In terms of power, it might still be the worst in IW, but it's perfectly serviceable for a map like Attack that's already so easy. Plus, ammo is never really a concern for the average player, since you can get more from the green blobs found around the city, essentially making this an infinite ammo wonder weapon. That, alongside with a lot of the other things Attack did with its gameplay, seemed to have been a response to the complaints about how Shaolin felt unfair and frustratingly hard at times. Alongside the Mad, Attack introduces a new perk in Change Choose. This is basically just elemental pop, but before it was cool. It's a lot better in this game than it was in Cold War though, since you can't actually get this ability from the Pack-a-Punch, you have to get it from this perk. But it's time to talk about the extremely poorly curved setup of the map. The gimmick, if you can call it that, of Attack is buildables, with over 30 of them being scattered around, and I'm just gonna say it, that is too many buildables, man. Setting up on Attack is akin to doing a real-life Easter egg hunt on a 10,000 square foot mansion, which is not nearly as fun by the 8th time you've done it. So with all of these buildables, you would think there's surely some fun and interesting equipment to use, right? Well yeah, actually there is. On this map, the buildables are mainly a mix of traps and score streak-like consumables. Each of these consumables are perfectly themed to the map. Things like the seismic wave generator that does exactly what it sounds like are really effective for taking out zombies in the early rounds, when it's easier to train them, and the violet ray device is the main high round strategy that can kill zombies on any round. The best part about these is how seamlessly the map integrated their design. It moves away from the mahjong tile searches or the gems from the other maps, in exchange for buildable parts that are naturally laid out inside the world and feel believable in the setting. Then once you do get them built and can use whatever you so desire, the map is fun. Like, really fun. Running around with the Mad and any number of powerful abilities makes you feel somewhat unstoppable and really completes that zombie power fantasy. So if you can stomach the, quite frankly, egregious setup process and really get a game of Attack going, you're probably gonna love it. The last caveat is what makes Attack such a hard map to recommend though. A lot of players do not enjoy the scavenger hunt aspect that a lot of Black Ops 2 and onward maps had, and Attack takes that idea to its extreme. Personally, it's really not my favorite thing either, and I have to be in a very specific mood to run this map. But when I am in that mood and get through the setup, it's some of the most fun I've had in this game. That setup process involves using one of the melee weapons to charge up some zombie goo and give it to Elvira to do something with? I don't really want to know. In exchange, she'll open up the portals that take you to Pack-a-Punch, and an RV you can rob for double upgrades. On the subject of Elvira, she's also acting as this map's announcer, which is fitting given her history as a character, and it's kind of a neat callback. While some of her dialogue can be charming at first, after the 8th small penis joke about Willard, it can get a little bit tiresome though. There are more teleporters that can be used by switching on 4 locations around the map. These will allow for easy and fast navigation once you're later into the game, similar to those doors on Shaolin. The fact that all but one map has something like this inside of IW, and the one map that's missing it, Rave, has a very poor issue with traveling to the island, is a really big quality of life improvement that shows Infinity Ward really understood how a zombies map should reward you as the game went on, removing the tedious parts of travel once you've earned it. This map's bonus round involves green goo descending from the skies to spawn these funky little guys. Appearance-wise, they're my favorite of the bunch, and there's this fun mechanic where you can actually shoot them out of the sky to avoid dealing with as many enemies at the same time. It's only really helpful in the boss fight, but it's fun nonetheless. And let's get into talking about that boss fight and the quests you need to do to get there. Much like the rest of the map, this entire egg is a collectathon. Maybe that Banjo-Kazooie reference before wasn't so out of place. It starts off by requiring you to do various small, mostly tedious tasks to grab different dismembered zombie parts, and then take them back to spawn for experimentation, I guess? And while Shaolin's boss fight and code step felt like oversights for solo players, those were cakewalks compared to this next step in solo. To reanimate the zombie, you need to lock yourself into a mini-game of guessing numbers. And no, the zombies will not stop chasing you and attacking you during this. So on solo, you need to run the zombie far away, then sprint back and rush your way through the step, hopefully finishing it before the zombie gets back to you. Oh, and one more thing, you gotta do it twice. On co-op, this is kind of a fun step, but it's really a look into how awful this quest can feel as a solo player in general. Outside of that misery, the whole process of searching for and getting all 17 parts for the egg-specific buildables in a map that's pretty expansive, so you spend most of your time running in between the areas, feels really bad as a solo player. It's not like collecting the other buildables, since those at least reward you with a new ability. Getting that one real interactive step done, the rest of the quest is just running around the map. You run to hit dials, then you run to find numbers sprawled around various locations. Those numbers are the start of why almost everyone I talk to about this map never wants to run the Easter egg. And fair warning, this is going to get a little bit angry. Okay, so buckle up and grab a notebook because this is going to be some wild stuff. First, you need to get the M number, which will be used for multiplication. Then you multiply it by changing the color settings of the map, running to 4 locations, which are annoyingly far away from each other, to find which one doesn't contain the does not equal sign. Once you get that multiplied number, go to Elvira's TV and see which range it falls into. Now you have to play the game in that color until further notice. The idea of swapping the color palette of the map is a fun way to use the theme of the game, but it could not have been implemented in a more infuriating step. The worst part about it though is we are not even close to done yet. So now you need to kill zombies until one drops a battery and saunter your way down to one of 2 radios that could actually contain what you need. Now listen to that radio several times while some scientist rambles about science stuff, and eventually he might quickly say how to defeat the radioactive thing. And he talks fast, so you better have your pen and paper ready and some fast hands, because if you miss it, you're gonna need to listen to every single rambling again after rewinding it. Okay, so now that you have that chemistry equation to make whatever he said, you need to pull up a guide and find out exactly how to make it with all the components you need. Normally, that's gonna require at least 8 or so parts, so now run around the entire map to find a board that has numbers and chemicals, make sure to mark down only the left and top one and add those together. Save the results for every single chemical you need, and these change every game, so you can't memorize them. And oh, if you're in the wrong TV color, this won't work because those numbers also change based on that. Now that you have that, you need to find however many of the 15 possible chemical spots to take to the garage. Now add those together using the top 2 numbers of every item that corresponds to the chemicals you need to mix them. Who thought that would be fun? Maybe I'm just out of touch with what the kids want nowadays, but I don't think that chemistry and arithmetic is what people want in their silly video game about shooting zombies. This is exactly the same thing they tried in Shaolin with inflating playtime of people searching for the quest, but it is 10 times worse. Whew. Okay, let's come back down. Thankfully, the boss fight of Attack is by far the best map ending. To start with, all you have to do is escort the nuke down to the bottom of the beach, all while fireballs and goo monsters rain down from the sky. After that, the laser turrets will become accessible, allowing you to damage the thing right before he attacks. This step is challenging since you need to time it with both the zombie horde and the potentially one-shotting ground attacks, but it does not feel unfair. Once you do enough damage, the thing will slowly cut off more and more training area, all while sending an increasing number of goo minions. Just as you're backed up and without any more room, the entire arena will transform into a parkour course, giving you limited time to reach the nuke. This is incredibly intense and I love it. Once you reach there, you can teleport in and play one of the most intense steps of any egg. You and all your teammates are on a timer with limited fails to input a code to blow up the nuke. The stress you feel while waiting to see if the team all gets it right, or being the last one not wanting to screw it up for everyone, is honestly peak gameplay. This is an absolute fantastic fight, and it's the only thing that makes the chemistry step somewhat worth doing. IW really needed to pull off a 10 out of 10 boss fight to make that Easter egg anywhere near bearable, so it is very commendable that they pulled it off. To conclude, I can understand where much of the hate about this map comes from. It certainly is not perfect, but if you're the right type of player in the right type of mood, the actual gameplay is surprisingly fun. One bad, okay, horrible, Easter egg segment gives the map its bad rep, and it's honestly kind of deserved. But that makes a lot of people ignore the actual gameplay of the map, which in turn is one of the most underrated entries in Infinite Warfare. Now, with the town saved and biological warfare used, we have just one last stop on our Infinite Warfare journey. And if you're one of the niche Call of Duty Ghost fans, this is gonna look pretty familiar. Beast from Beyond is the Willard Wyler sequel that no one really asked for, but are willing to give a chance. In this universe, Ghost's extinction is retconned to exist as a movie made by the big WW. You're gonna spawn in with some higher powered gear now too, having access to a full AR instead of the normal pistol. This is because until you manage to grab Neil, the robot from Spaceland, and throw him into a computer, you're gonna get hunted down by the extinction cryptids. When you're first learning the map, this is honestly extremely difficult. They can start to swarm and overwhelm you very quickly and kill you in 3 hits, and your AR is probably not gonna last you the entire way unless you have extended mags. I do really enjoy the mix-up in formula, however, and it's fitting that Infinite Warfare ended on a map like this since it really was all about innovation and gameplay shakeups. In a slightly negative side of it though, it can be very annoying for new players who don't understand what to do, since you are going to have to buy another gun and they're probably going to underestimate the cryptid damage, and there really isn't any indication of what you need to do, that being find Neil's head and bring it to spawn. So while it's fun, it could have been implemented a lot better even if I do really enjoy it. The map itself consists of tight hallways leading to very open areas, which leads to manageable but tight training. The open areas are reminiscent to what you would see on Rave, making the map relatively easy in the early to mid rounds, before all the special zombies spawn in. One of these open spots, the cargo hold, is where you gain access to a teleporter that will send you into a version of the theater and Afterlife arcade from the cutscenes. It's a little weird since you're in the Afterlife arcade, but you also go to a different one when you die, so I don't quite know how that works, but I digress. Outside of some weird story issues, it's a very thematically fitting and well-designed ending point for the maps, and it does hold the best training location for the map. A lot of Beast from Beyond acts as a love letter to the game, with constant callbacks and revamps of previous map mechanics. That's fun when you look at how Double Pack-a-Punch requires you to use a brute helmet from the Spaceland projector, or how the Entangler from Ghosts and Skulls is actually a weapon now, but it's less fun when you realize that means these guys return. The ninja zombies were absolutely hated on launch at Shaolin, so the choice to have them come back, even if it isn't a small way, is baffling to me. It's also an issue since the enemies like the slasher or clown zombies, or the ninja zombies, were not designed with a layout like Beast in mind, and it feels like Beast also wasn't designed with all of them in mind, and those enemies also weren't designed with each other in mind, so there's a lot of issues there. I can mostly look past those faults though, since overall, the callbacks are fun and make sense in the world. One of those elements returning not from IW but from Ghosts is the Venom X. This acts as the wonder weapon on Beast from Beyond, and once you get it upgraded to the Venom Z, it's actually really fun and strong. Sadly, I highly doubt you're going to want to spend the time doing that upgrade though. Seriously, this is Ghosts and Skulls quest level of ridiculous. The big first step, you're supposed to solve a complex formula to figure out which button to hit. But looking at that, absolutely no one wants to do it. So much like the Blood of the Dead step, you should just brute force this and take your failures. And if your step is so bad, it's better to not solve it at all, you messed up developing it. Then once you do have that done, you'll have to solve an invisible maze to connect 2 shapes on a screen, which is just so frustrating since there's so many possible options and you don't get a ton of time with a zombie trapped. All of that is just to get the Venom X, not even to start upgrading it, and it only gets worse from here. That's because we're back to Morse code, baby, as you'll have to get some beeps and boops and then enter whatever word it gave you. Then there's actually 2 sets of dots and dashes you gotta listen to. One is very long, I might add, and you have to re-enter that into a computer yourself. That will tell you how many cryptids you need to kill with your Venom X. And honestly, the Venom X is not very good before upgraded, so doing this will take a while. Okay, so that will get you the access to upgrade to the Venom Y. Now it's time for the Venom Z, the real good Wonder Weapon. First, you need to make sure you got the Entangler, so do that step, at least it's simple. And once you get it, it's time for more Morse code because you're doing the same thing again. Once again, it's incredibly long and gives you some steps to do later, involving killing special zombies and hidden figures from Attack of the Radioactive Thing. Then once you do finally kill the number of required special enemies, you need to swap a computer date to the 50s, which is kinda cool, and then shoot at the newly spawned ghosts in front of the teleporter machine. And like I said, this is honestly pretty cool. Probably the only good upgrade step on the map, and completing it will finally give you access to the Venom Z. This is a great and fun wonder weapon, but in no world is it worth the upgrade process it takes. This wouldn't even be worthwhile for something like the Origin Stabs. And honestly, I would rather upgrade every single one of those solo while playing on inverted controls than have to do this again, because at least those can be fun. It's really sad to see how a lot of the quests, side and main, kind of downgraded as the game went on. I think after Rave it was kind of a steep decline in the main quests, because they got a little bit too ambitious and tried to make the game longer and pad it out. Outside of that mini quest, let's take a step back and see how this map is actually designed. In terms of layout and atmosphere, I do unfortunately think it is the worst of the 5. That's not to say it's horrible, still managing to at least be an average map, but it's pretty clear the devs were low on time and some things had to get rushed out. The flow between rooms feels jarring in a way sections of other maps never did. The theater design outside of the main training area can feel pretty lifeless, and the map just generally lacks the same charm seen throughout the rest of the game. On the note of charm, I think it's actually a good time to talk about the main crew of the game, since it might seem weird that I haven't done this up till this point, but I wanted to get every form of them before giving my thoughts. Each map, our 4 actors are transformed to fit whatever role is best for that movie, which is a really fun idea and makes sense with the general framing of the story, but I think more care needed to be taken in still giving them more consistent personalities. I honestly could not tell you many goals or motivations for this set of characters outside of get Willard and get out. We don't know much about their history, what they want, and the character shifts are so different between maps it does feel like a totally new crew sometimes. All of that makes it really hard to get attached to these guys. Similarly to the characters, this is the only map to not have a celebrity cameo. And while it's not something required for the game, it's a bit odd and disappointing not to see one in the conclusion when every other map did so. Again, this can probably be chalked up to time constraints and budget. And now there isn't really a lot else to say about Beast before its main quest. There really isn't many new aspects added to the game here, and there isn't a lot of side content to complete. So is the main quest something that can save this map and bring it back into the upper tiers? Nah, not really. Thankfully, at least it's short. The first step is the best and really the only good one. You need to complete a Ghost and Skull's Egg challenge by standing still inside of an area, holding off the horde. It's a fun kill step that can be challenging without making you angry. Then you need to go on a mission to collect 4 floppy disks with a symbol. This can be easy like shooting a stream with a helmet, or annoying like searching all over the ground to see where the phantom you killed decided to load the disk. Once getting those and entering the code, with a guide needed, Neil will get angry and try to kill you with doors during his tantrum. But you can simply navigate to the theater, pull a button off the wall, and shoot it into the Beast from Beyond poster. That will spawn it in the map. Pressing this will open up a puzzle in the next room, which is really easy to solve. Just click all of the ones that were vertical or all of the ones that were horizontal. Doing that, you can now grab Angie Neil's head and shove him into a computer by training the hordes around of buffed up zombies while not being able to shoot back. And now I kind of take back what I said about the first step being the only good one, because this can be fun. Is what I would say if it wasn't always glitchy as all hell. I've had multiple instances where either the doors that were supposed to shut just stayed open, the zombies didn't spawn in, or they did spawn in and no doors would open up for me and I just died with nothing to do. Anyway, you can now go to the boss fight, and this is definitely the hardest ending fight for a map. Starting right off the bat, you have to take down 4 rhinos in a pretty tight area. Getting the Kindles and Venom Z for this can almost feel like a necessity, but getting Kindles are also incredibly rare on this map, so that's probably going to take you like 20 rounds. Once you do kill the rhinos and survive a couple waves of cryptids, several computers will turn on. You have to quickly hit all of them at once, which is a well-designed step and rewards good players with good pathing. Honestly, despite its difficulty, it's a pretty fun fight up there with Rave and Spaceland. The hardest part of it is the next 2 steps. You have to survive 99 seconds of increasingly difficult waves of rhinos, phantoms, and smaller cryptids. This is the part most players are going to fail on, since it gets hectic and if you make one wrong turn, you'll likely get red screened from a rhino. Managing to complete that will spawn in blue rhinos based on your player count, which will slowly add fire around the entire arena as you damage them. If you don't have an ERB bomber, these guys are going to take ages to kill, making 80% of the arena a hazard, and while fun, the spawn rate on fire could use a small nerf in my opinion. And that's the last step of Infinite Warfare. collect the soul key and we'll be transported back to Willard and trigger a cutscene. Understandably, our crew is a bit upset and throws silly little Willy into Spaceland. Gameplay-wise, he's now a playable character on the map, which is pretty cool. For some reason though, our crew is given usher uniforms and unable to leave the theater. I wonder what that's about. Maybe we'll get a sequel. Beast from Beyond is a map that clearly had high ambitions that were stifled by the workload the team was under on the time, which led to very little new content in the map, seemingly untested map features that conflicted heavily with each other, and an overall buggy experience. While I wish we did get to see the true vision of the map, it still managed to be enjoyable despite its issues, even if it is the worst map in the game. And that's where our Infinite Warfare journey is gonna end. No new maps come after this, and it's a bittersweet note to end on. So I guess I'll see you all next time. Nah, I'm just messing with you. They were not gonna leave us high and dry like that. Completing each Easter egg in the game grants the player access to Director's Cut, the best super Easter egg reward in any game by a country mile. Turning this on spawns you into the map with 15,000 points, every single box open is Pack-a-Punched, double Pack-a-Punch is already unlocked, and every single wonder weapon can be found in the box with its upgraded version. So you can finally give that Venom Z a go. Then if you go through and complete every single map on Director's Cut, we get a second super Easter egg where we find out that good old Willy actually made a deal with Satan to get fame in exchange for souls. And no need for a sequel, that explains why we're still here. He wants us to work for him now. Naturally, our set of actors say they're not about that life, and we enter into the hardest and best boss fight in Zombies history. This is not a one and done try, so you're gonna have to try this several times, so better get real good at Beast from Beyond. So how does this fight work? Well, the first phase is to place talismans that you collected on the ground symbols one at a time. Then you have to stay inside of it while hordes of skeletons and meth attacks rain down on you. Once it's finally filled, you need to grab the souls with the Entangler and launch them into Mephistopheles, spawning in glowing symbols for you to shoot. This is repeated 4 more times, with each completion giving him new attacks to work with and adding more special zombies from the previous maps into the arena. So it's time to slay those ninja zombies one last time. Finally, after all 5 waves are done, the difficulty and intensity is turned up to a 15, with Meph throwing everything he can at you while every single enemy from the game spawns in to chase you down. You have to fire everything you have into his chest as the talismans rise up, then interact one last time to send a beam through his chest, finally taking this hellspawn of a boss down. And I mean this 100% when I say that Meth is the best boss fight and unlock experience in anything in any of the Zombies franchise, and is one of the most creative implementations any of these games have had, in any area. This is the first game to feel like it has a worthwhile gameplay conclusion, mixed in with its Easter eggs. And it's an enemy that feels like a true final boss. Nothing in the series will get your heart rate and adrenaline up in the same way the ending phases of this fight does. This leads to one final cutscene, and that's really the end of IW, no tricks this time. It was a game of highs and lows, but honestly mostly highs, and even at its lowest points, it still clearly had passion and creative ideas the devs wanted to get in there. I stand by it being a top 3 game, and I hope that maybe it at least moves up a little bit in your guys' tier list too after this video. You don't have to agree with me on that, and I bet most of you won't. But like I said, I'm just trying to give people a greater appreciation for this mode. I also think this really is what marks the end of COD Zombies' golden era. Going forward, the mode lost a lot of its fan passion and love, constantly trying to reinvent itself to get it back. So taking a look at my tier list that everyone hates me for nowadays, both Rave and Spaceland are firmly in the A tier, and Shaolin in B. The only one falling below that is Beast from Beyond, and overall it's a really strong showing for a non-Treyarch title. Thank you so much for watching, subscribe for more, and I hope I'll see you around.